TFD Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Sullivan, and this is the show where we break down popular science into easily digestible and actionable information to give you the blueprint to be a high performer in your life. Today, I'm joined by Paul Reed. Paul's a combat sports performance coach and newly appointed head of performance at the English Mixed Martial Arts Association. He is also the second half of Vortex Combat Sport Performance, which is run alongside combat sports science expert Dr. Carl Evans. Paul's making some serious waves in the MMA world, and he's starting at the grassroot level. He's passionate about making positive changes in the community, and in particular, improving the culture of weight cutting amongst athletes at all levels. In this episode, Paul and I discuss his background in MMA, the current landscape of making weight, worrying practices amongst amateur athletes, the role of parents and coaches, how to influence change in these communities, and we finish with an enlightening discussion about one of Paul's more well-known clients, Paddy The Baddy Pimblett. This is an absolute banger, so let's get to it. All right, we are live for another episode of the TFD Performance Podcast. I am joined by a very special guest all the way from the UK, Mr. Paul Reed. Paul, thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks for having me, mate. Absolute pleasure.
Mate, very first question, before we get into your resume, before we get into your background, I need to ask you this. You must have a time machine or something, because once we go through everything you do and everything you're a part of, it is perplexing how you must fit all of this in your day. What's your secret? Have you cracked the code? What is going on?
I think I feel I'm kind of blessed to be involved in some of the things I'm doing and the opportunities I've had. But mate, I'm getting old, and I realise I won't be doing this for a long time. So I like working hard. Super passionate about working with people and performance, and just like giving something back. But I don't know, mate, I enjoy it, I think. So if you enjoy something, you give your time to it. And I've got a very caring and understanding wife as well.
Yeah, it makes things a lot easier. Hey, but before we get into it, Paul, give us a little bit of your background about your background, the MMA scene, how you got into it, how you got involved in all the things you're involved in.
I think first and foremost, start with the background that I am actually a corporate owner of the UK's largest Mercedes-Benz van and truck business. So, and I've had 30 years of being the boss, the leader, the gaffer, so to speak. So leading people, coaching people, it kind of comes naturally. I don't know how I ended up in that position, but I've had that position for a long time. I don't do as much now because I've got a good team, but I've been involved in combat sport since the age of 6 on the judo mat, really, that my dad pushed me into. Amateur boxer, kickboxer, BJJ practitioner. I'm a bit of a gym rat, if I'm honest, as well, mate. And I've motocrossed, I've quad bike racing competitively. I've kind of done all the things that, probably why I'm a bit broken today. But ultimately, combat sport's a passion as well, mate. It's a passion. MMA is a passion. I've been in the gym with them lads for a long time, and I've seen some of them kids that they were then, and I'm actually working with them from being on the gym mat all the way back to working with them now in Bellator and UFC and Cage Warriors and all this kind of thing. So it's a passion, mate. It's just decades in around the sport, and the progress of the sport has been unbelievable. When you think about the things we used to do and used to go on to the things today, it's on a good journey, but it's got a long way to go yet. Also, mate, as well, I'm an ex-promoter. I had my own MMA show called Shinobi, and then we developed the Cage Warriors Academy. So, and I learned more from that, mate, I've got to say, than anything. Years and years of doing weigh-ins and taking data from people and observing what they do was a great time.
Yeah, and then we want to talk about that. We want to go, because me and Paul have had some really, really good conversations, especially when it comes to cutting weight with amateurs. What do you do to fix it? But before we get on that, Paul, you've been involved in combat sports over in the UK for so long. What's it been like seeing the progress over the years of the sport, just as it's been then and as it is now?
Goes down two roads, this, I think. Unfortunately, some of the old stuff is still around. We've got to admit that. It's hard changing opinions from people who started in the sport. I guess I carry a bit of credibility because I am old school, but I'm trying to do things in a new way. When you consider everything from competition standards of shows, like there was some scary stuff going on, mate. I mean, you've only got to look at some of the old school shows that don't exist anymore, thank God. From a matchmaking perspective, from the old rule sets, of course, as well. So head stomps and, kicks to the head and all this kind of stuff. So that's all changed for the better, hasn't it? And the UFC is obviously a big driving point of that as well, because of where they are today. But for me, it's still I still also see some of the old things around how you cut weight, how you eat around this time and stuff. And then don't get me wrong, there's more. You've only got to search combat sport weight cutting now in Google or go on Twitter. I mean, there's more people talking about it to raise the profile, I guess, of the dangers of that. If I'm honest, though, there's something wrong in that at the same time, because it's not making it through to change the culture. So I've seen it all, I guess, really, mate. And I've seen some people change with the times, and I've seen some people that I still find it hard to say, we've got to do things in a safer way. We've got more kids than ever now. They used to get people that had fought in whatever they fought and come and fight MMA because it was cool. Now we've got 13-year-olds, mate. Our squad goes 13 to 17, 17 to 21, 21 and above. We've got to put some safety around that and some framework around that. That wasn't the case when MMA started. You didn't see kids on the mat everywhere. Great jiu-jitsu practitioners, doing no headshot MMA. You didn't see that, and that's where we are today. And that's why I'm kind of passionate about it, to add some value, because it is about these kids. They will be the future superstars.
And speaking of weight cutting, let's just get into it, because we do spend a lot of time talking about it, and you and I have had really good combos. It's an interesting point, right? Like you said, when you go to Google, you punch in, weight cutting, whatever, weight cutting information. How do I cut weight? What's the best way? There is a lot more information. Like now, I remember trying to look it up 10 years ago, and it was bone dry. All the information you might find on like a random BJJ page, or I don't know, something like that, and it's just now we've got so much more information. But it's an interesting paradox almost, isn't it? Because we've got so much information and more people doing it, but are we necessarily seeing benefits? What are your thoughts on that?
I did a little, got on my soapbox about this yesterday, if I'm honest, mate, because I was talking about, I guess it's procrastination. It's kind of like that peacock effect of puffing your feathers up and starting to shout about on Twitter and Google. And what I'm saying is there's two things. There's the sports science approach that helps practitioners, or there's a sports science approach it dictates in a fashion that people don't enjoy. Maybe it makes people feel stupid because they don't understand it, So if you put anything out in this arena that people don't understand, then you're not hitting the spot. My biggest issue is you can see Twitter every day with a case study or somebody doing a talk, but then I'm sitting in a gym or holding seminars, or actually just helping a local show doing their weigh-ins and talking to parents and athletes and coaches. And none of these people are reading that, and none of these people are getting that information. So there's a disjoint somewhere for me, and the basics aren't making it through. We've got to remember, we've got to affect 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, their parents, their coaches. Like, some of this work is great, but I encourage people to come to a show, come to a local promotion, come and do the weigh-ins, stand next to me, come and see some of the stuff going on, interview the kids, talk to their parents. There's more gain value from that than you'll ever get the time you've took to publish this study that's not making it anywhere, because you've got the time to talk and influence the people. And the big thing for me, Jordan, is however we give this information out, it's got to be coached into somebody. You've got to make people believe you. You've got to make people believe you're there to help them. You're not dictating to people. You're not trying to put yourself on a platform above them. You've got to coach this into people, and that's a skill set for me. The information we deliver has got to be coached, that people take it away believing that you're there to help them, because they'll engage with you then.
What are some of the things you're seeing with the juniors, Paul? Because obviously you're involved with a lot of them across the UK. Are you seeing that they're looking for this information and not necessarily finding it, or they're maybe talking to practitioners and they're just not, getting the information across in an effective way? What are you seeing with the younger guys?
If I break it down into the culture that I'm seeing, and it was only a week last Saturday, I held the weigh-ins for a local show, which was a youth show, no headshot show, so up to age 17. So And it's the same thing I see every time. But on that show, I'll just give you an examples, I think, but it hits home. There was a massive argument, and actually parents are parents, right? Parents can be a pain in the ass in MMA, unfortunately, as in all sports, but there was a huge argument, got out of hand in front of kids. I wasn't there representing the promotion. I'm there representing English MMA into the weigh-ins, but I had to intervene and tell them to take the argument outside for the start to get it away from the kids. Secondly, the argument was one kid missed weight by 2 kilos. The excuse from the coach was he's very disappointed in the kid because he's had breakfast, and blamed it on that. So there's your number one problem, because the first thing I said is the kid should be able to have breakfast. He's in a no headshot bout and he's 15 years of age. The second argument for the other parent was, I've been super professional while he was shouting at him. I've had my kid in Epsom salt baths all night. So, so you've gone to 2 stages here. You've got one coach blaming an athlete for having breakfast. You've got another coach thinking he's professional, thinking he's gaining an advantage by sitting a 15-year-old in the salt bath, and then arriving with just a litre bottle of water, clean water, because he thinks that's the hydration process for the recovery. So, now my immediate thoughts were like, call the bout off. Actually, because I kind of thinking the parents might be getting in the cage after if it carried on, if I'm honest, mate. But all of that influence comes from parent pressure to win fights, thinking there's an advantage, yeah? That's where it starts. But then, of course, it can be deemed to be sexy when they're seeing all these pro athletes in the UFC making weight and wrapped in towels. So when you come back down to it, this is a parent making a decision with not informed at all, that's seen something on YouTube thinking it's great to sit a kid in bath and make him sweat. I mean, it's horrendous. But then I've spoke to other kids who miss weight or made weight and talking about all the extra runs and extra work and running in sweatsuits that they were made to do. So, and then you've got the kids who weren't eating a lot. So it's multifaceted. It's like lack of eating, it's sweat, dehydration protocol, it's not understanding how to recover. But the big thing for me is there was kids that come in 3 kilos underweight and were winning bouts all day. Because actually at that level with no headshots, it's skill that wins. So number one, we've got to change a culture to say, you're not gaining any advantage from making your kids cut weight. And actually, Jordan, and I discussed this yesterday, why do we get weight classes for kids? Why don't we just get the coaches to say, he walks around about this weight and the other coach says the same thing and they get matched? And take the pressure off, because of the girls, the young girls we've had podcasts with and spoke to, we're creating actually psychological impact as well, because they're becoming frightened of food, not only the social media pressure because of body image, but now they're in combat sport where they're making weight, and food's become an issue with kids where it's no longer performance linked. Food is treated as a way to lose weight. And that bothers me, because that culture's growing. And I was quite outspoken about it yesterday. We've got to stop that culture somehow. So, it's multifaceted. We've got to get into parents, we've got to talk to the kids, but we've got to do it in a way that they understand. And we've managed to do that, mate. I've got tangibles. And for me, it's like, if we're impacting the sport, we need to have evidence, not just holding or publishing a study. I want to say, this is an individual. This is the person's name. This is the person's face. This is their age. This is what they were doing, and this is what we delivered, and this is what they're doing now. Because for me, that's tangible. We've changed an athlete's perspective. We changed their health. We changed their performance, and now they're interacting well. That's a big thing for me when I take it back to IMAF, for example, and their weight making committee. It's met twice. It's kind of well known, but I always say, just name me an athlete you've changed their culture, their process there. And if you can't do that, then we're failing. And that's the big one for me. It's like the lack of understanding, and that's not just amateurs. That's not kids. Sorry, that's right the way through amateurs to pros. Ridiculous water loading protocols, tapering off far too early, taking carbohydrates off, 2 and 3 weeks out, and actually lowering carbohydrate all the way through camp, until and then through this kind of poor dehydration protocol and like really dangerous stuff. So the unfortunate thing is these kids are in the gyms with the people doing it, and it's making its way down. So we need this ground up approach. I want to kind of teach kids, mate, that they're the almost become the influencers in the gym. That actually these young progressive amateurs, start talking in the right language that actually influences from ground up, not from the top down to the bottom.
That was going to be my question, Paul, is what do you think the best solution is if we do want to influence these kids? And like you said, it's a multifaceted approach, right? Like in anyone that's involved in this, you can argue to the cows come home. You can argue with people. And I've done it. I've done it on a podcast as well. And I do it quite a lot where you can talk rule changes and okay, maybe if we do this and do that, rule changes. And then you can go over to the culture side and say, you know what? It's all dwindles down to the gym. And then you go, well, then they've got to go home from the gym. There's an organizational structure. There's a family structure there as well. Then there's a relationship with the coach. What do they believe? It's so multifaceted. At the end of the day, we need to have some type of influence on these kids. What are your thoughts? What do you think are the best ways moving forward?
So, look, we're in a good place because we're now getting more and more athletes joining the English Mixed Martial Arts Association. And we've got good figureheads. And as you know, my partner in Vortex, who's part of the performance board that I head up, is Carl Evans. Now, Carl's a top man, and we need to utilize the likes of Carl. We've also got Kelly Stadden, that's also a judoka, and she's on the English MMA team. She's competing at the Four Nations, but a great nutritionist. They're starting to reach out and working individually with these kids. But we want to put an educational platform together. We want to do something where we kind of start teaching parents, kids, coaches, because at the moment we're trying to develop actually coaching qualifications for coaches, because we need to start getting that out in the sport. But we also want to start making part of the IMAF coaching curriculum almost to also have these kind of base level nutrition, understanding, weight cutting, understanding the do's and the don'ts. I think for me, we've got a fabulous opportunity because we're at squad days constantly. Yeah. So, and I know for the fact that when every squad day, we're making an influence on somebody's taking it back to their gym because people are saying thanks and what a great difference it's made. And then we want them to kind of affect their peers with that and the way they've been taught. For me, that's the big thing. We've got, it's only 70 athletes on the squad, but that's 70 athletes we weren't talking to before. And I think the growth now, we only really got going January, mate. Four Nations, and then we've got Euros and Worlds. Spoke to IMAF yesterday about saying, look, some of the stuff we want to do, we want to align with you because now you're talking about thousands of athletes. At the recent IMAF in January, Jordan, there was people cutting weight every morning in sweatsuits on treadmills for same day weigh-ins, which actually made it that bad, mate. We couldn't go in the gym and work out because it was hanging with sweat everywhere. And that's kind of, I'm saying, we're missing the point. So for me, it's coming back to an educational platform, and we're going to hold monthly Zooms for the whole team to come on and listen to stuff. I'm not great at getting information out there, but I like talking to people individually. But, the last couple of squad sessions, we've done good talks and people have took away things and they've already started changing things. So, and we've had some unbelievable results, especially with young females, Jordan, as well. About the principles of sports nutrition, just eating well really and taking the pressure off. So for me, it's got to be an educational platform, but I don't think there's many of us really making the right noises about how we communicate that actually translates. Yourself, Carl, myself, I don't know who else is talking in that space, and there will be more. So I apologize if I've missed a lot of others, but I need to kind of collaborate with people to say, look, we all need to get aligned with this and we need to get the message, because the 13 and 14-year-old should be our absolute focus for me, Jordan, if I'm honest, because the risks involved in that, and of course the importance of nutrition at that adolescence, puberty point is so important in their development as well.
Yeah, I remember when I did a jiu-jitsu comp years and years and years ago, and I remember we were waiting outside in the sun, waiting to weigh in. They only had one weigh-in time, and every competitor had to go weigh in. So we're waiting for ages. So you probably lost a kilo or whatever, just waiting out in the blistering Aussie sun. When it came time to go weigh in, there was a girl in front of me, a small girl with her mother. And then she stepped on the scale, and I think she was 100 grams over. And then they wouldn't let her compete, and they gave her this big talk and blah, blah, blah. And it was because we were standing in the sun for over an hour and she sipped on water. And I remember just thinking, this is so backwards. Like, how could anyone even think this? And why? It wasn't even the conversation that was being had. It was the fact that the guy that was checking weight, that's just the culture that he grew up in, is that you make weight no matter what.
It's, it's a good point, and Carl raised this yesterday. It's about the commission role within this, because actually that's incredibly misleading and driving bad practice. You've got to look in some of the other sports, thankfully not MMA, but there's 2% and 5% and 7.5%. And what all they're doing is making people cut at different stages, putting weight back on and cut again because they've got to be. So I think, and let's be honest, mate, we've got people making decisions in commission about weight making of either never make weight themselves or never work with anybody making weight. And that's a danger, right? Because they believe they're doing the right thing. My issue is they don't listen, they won't listen, or they won't kind of collaborate with us or kind of listen to say, that's not great. You're actually working against the principle of safe weight cutting. So, and Carl was quite outspoken about that yesterday, and he's right. The commission and this drive, especially with kids about weight, weight classes and what you do overweight. For me, mate, I sat in a competition and you've got people well over and well under. My immediate thoughts is, well, why are you having weight categories? Because they all fought. So why are you creating the pressure in the first place? So number one is, like, take the pressure off these kids. They've got all that to come if they develop in the sport. Take the pressure away and actually tell people it's not cool. It's not cool to cut weight, especially as a kid, especially if you don't understand the process either. But it's same day weigh-in. We talked about same day weigh-in, this belief of same day weigh-ins are safer. Well, they're not if they're done badly. They're actually worse. So, I mean, we've got to get away from that as well. It's an ultimate wish before I get too old and don't do this anymore, is that the people running commission and making decisions understand it, have worked in it, liaise with people like yourself, Jordan and Carl, because you're the people who make the difference to these commissions. You put good practices in place. But ultimately, kids, take it away. Stop doing it, because wherever I go, and it'll be every country, they're cutting weight. And I don't know, we know the long-term effect in the kid. There's no research about the long-term effect in the kid. I would say it'll be a lot more serious, the potential long-term impact on health. So for me, if we start getting hold of these, because every gym now is growing with kids on the mat. What we've got at the top end, I don't know if we're going to influence that, but they're adults making their own decisions and getting paid as pros. But these kids, if we can start at that end, we're stopping it when it gets to when they grow to be the professional athletes of tomorrow. Maybe that's where we make a difference. And then it's how we influence the commission.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Hey, this isn't really a sport where you can give advice by sitting on the sidelines. I talk about this all the time. It's when it comes to cutting weight, I'd say outside of very, very particular endurance events in sports nutrition where people are out for possibly days and they're dehydrating their body, they can be quite dangerous if done wrong. That's a very, 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 very small percentage of people. When we look at more mainstream sports, combat sports are by far and wide the most dangerous sports because of this making weight procedure that people put themselves through. And the thing is that there is no good information. And when there is good information, it's very difficult to get it out. And like we're saying, rule changes, same day weigh-in, so many people put all this information and they convolute it. And I think they almost miss the point, right? I can't tell you how many promoters and people I've spoken to where they go, you know what, I'm going to have multiple weigh-ins throughout leading up to this thing. And I go, yeah, that's a great idea, but you're missing the point, because all you're doing is making these guys cut weight multiple times leading up. And how about we set up a structure where they can lose their weight safely and come in and educate them, and they go, no, we just put in these and it'll work. No, it doesn't work. It's not how this works. It's definitely not one of those sports where you can sit on the sideline and bark advice. You need to be in there, and that's how you influence change.
I think you said these words to me last time we spoke. You've got to get in the trenches with these guys to make some decisions and try and influence people. You can't sit in theory. You can't sit in research, but if you've never worked with these athletes, combat sport athletes are special athletes. Let's be honest, they're special people. You've got to be a special person because you want to be punched in the head for a living, right? So, but what they do and the pressures that they're under, and then some of the bad advice, you've got to work with these people. You've got to find a way that they believe in you, they become consistent, they live and breathe the message you're sending. There's a way to influence, and issue is, and I know my place in this sport. There's people a lot better than me, yeah, certainly from an academic background, but they're using that academic background in just a very poor way, and that's my issue with it. It's like, I don't want you puffing your chest out saying I know what the effects of acute weight loss is. I'm not bothered with that. I'm bothered, will you give some time to impact the people who are doing it? I'm not bothered in your research because people aren't reading it. I'm bothered, will you give some time to come and work with some athletes? Because it will need an amount of volunteer time. You know, it will need that. We've got so many kids we need to influence, and a really bad culture that we've got to change. It needs a bit of good people giving a little bit of time to get the message across and coming together. That's my biggest issue with it, because I go back to what we said before. Search Google, go on Twitter. All I ever see, but then I relate that to is, I'm with these people week in, week out, and none of their messages are getting through. So you might as well stop it and give your effort somewhere else. And that's the thing for me, because we struggle for good practitioners or people who will come and volunteer or people who will come and help. We struggle for that. But I wouldn't struggle if somebody wanted to post something about some research.
Yeah, it's a funny area, right? And you and I spoke about this last time as well, where I think there's a lot of well-intentioned practitioners out there as well, or people who really, they look at this from the outside and they may not be involved in the sport, and they might just be passionate about helping people. And they go, you know what? I want to come and do some good. I'll do my part. And again, like you said, it's a special sport where you can't really be doing it from the sidelines because of how these guys are and just what's involved in the making weight process and what these guys go through and their mindset towards it. Like you said, it's a very delicate psychology. Like, it is inherently disordered as it is. So not only are you trying to get these guys to make weight safely and to do this in the most scientific way, you're also delicately managing their psychology, and you're delicately dancing on that line. Or am I going to give this person some disordered eating behaviors, which is inherent in the sport, and how am I going to manage that? And that's not something you get taught at university. I don't care how much you read on Google. I don't care how much you want to talk to other people. Unless you get in there and you do this with the athlete and you see what they go through in an 8-week camp, even if it's a junior throughout a competitive cycle, what they do week in, week out, what their training looks like, what their coaches are saying to them, what their parents are saying to them, what the conversation is around them dieting and making weight, you'll never, ever, ever be able to influence change. And more often than not, you'll probably come in and these very delicate plates that are balancing, you'll just start smashing them left, right, and center. Even though you're very well intentioned, you have to really, really be in there and understand these people and understand the language and understand the culture. That's when you can start making change.
What you've just said, I feel like I need to bottle that now and just send it out to everybody, right? Because that's in a nutshell is my entire belief. That you've just nailed it, mate. It's a hard one, but you've got to be a coach. You've got to be relatable. You've got to coach this into people, not dictate it into people. My entire career has been around trying to coach something into somebody that changes their behavior, whether that's in the business world or that's in the sports performance world. Like, you've got to coach people. It's the most important thing I feel about combat sport weight cutting. Like, you can't just come and blitz people with some kind of theory or academia. You've got to try and coach it into people and understand at which point makes a difference. Which are the points I'm telling people or coaching into people, actually now I'm seeing that's making change in their behavior, and start really breaking that down. And it does start with the basics, because some of the, Kelly was talking about it yesterday as well. Kelly works with some of the young female athletes. It's great because they relate to her. She's a combat sport athlete, a female, and a good nutritionist. But the way she's changed some of these kids is about good coaching and great practical basics to start applying. And sometimes we miss the point of that. Some of these kids just don't understand the absolute basics of how to approach all year round nutrition, why they shouldn't be weight cutting, and actually give them some health issues they could create, because there's nothing wrong with that. You've got to give them that evidence. But like, Kelly's having great success because she's just teaching basics to start with. But she's relatable. She's in the sport. She's done some horrible weight cuts herself, and that's a good place to come from, as being a judo practitioner. Because judo has some serious weight cutting issues as well on the same day, especially some of the weight they're cutting. So it's the same kind of thing for me. The language we use is super important, mate. Super important.
Yeah, that's a good example, right? Like, I always have this conversation with new clients that we're onboarding, and I say to them, I completely understand the want to weight cut as well. And I distinctly remember when I was competing a lot, that this mindset that you're in, you almost go into this animal mode. And when you get to the competition and you make weight, it's almost that thing where I've suffered more than you have, so there's no way I'm going to let you beat me. And I completely understand that. That all went out the window for me when I started working with top level fighters, like top world champion fighters. And then I realized that they care a lot more about winning than they do about cutting weight. And when you win, there's a lot more fruits of your labor than there is of just making weight. And when you step on a scale and hit a number, you don't get anything but a little pat on the back and a little tick, and then you go. And then once I realized that there's a lot more fruits of the labor once you win and actually get in competition, and saw what these, and the one thing that I saw all these top high level guys doing, they weren't cutting a lot of weight. And I think it's a mistake that so many people make. They just think, oh yeah, I'm going to do it. And everyone talks about the fight before the fight. I think that's the most silliest term ever. It's like, you've already got one fight to think about, which is already dangerous and hard enough as it is. Don't put yourself through this, because the top level guys, they aren't doing it. It doesn't work.
100%, mate. And it's kind of when we say to the kids that the most dangerous thing you'll ever do is not getting into the fighting arena. It's cutting weight badly. The most dangerous thing we ever face is not knees, elbows, I'm talking professional sport, obviously, but, taking blows to the head. And that's not the most dangerous thing. The most dangerous thing you'll ever do is not understand the weight cutting safe practices and actually putting yourself under pressure with that. And that's a big conversation we've had with the kids as well. We want them to be safe. Combat sports, not safe, let's be honest. Yeah, so there's no way around that. But it's a lot unsafer if you're doing some of these weight cutting practices,
Yeah, and I think it's scary now, right? And we're starting to see it, and I'm seeing it in practice. And I always like the saying that you don't need a study to tell you that the trees are green. And I've seen that these trees are very green for a long time, and I'm sure you've seen it even longer than I. Like the complications that come when someone goes into a fight when they're not adequately rehydrated after a tough weight cut, or they've had a brutal camp. You see it. I wish I could just line up all of those athletes that I've been involved with that have done big weight cuts, and I guarantee that they have either taken losses in those fights or they've got badly injured. And it's something, it's never going to get studied because you're never going to be able to push that through. But when you're in there, in the ground, in the trenches with these guys, and you do it enough times, you start putting these things together. And I think everyone who is in the TFD team that has been there for over 2 years, and they've started seeing all this, all of them at a certain stage of their career as they're coming through the team, they all say, man, weight cutting really fucks up these guys' results, don't they? And you go, yeah, exactly. But you have to do so many rounds and so many reps with these guys to see that. But you'll never read a study about it. But we all know that the trees are green. We all know, we can all perfectly see it.
Do you know what? I was, them years of doing the weigh-ins at my shows and taking information and watching people carry to the scale. I mean, I started putting the medical team on at weigh-ins, which is a regional show where amateur was never, we were the first show to ever do that. And the people we used, Dr. Chris Lamb, were the UFC medics, so started putting them in amateur shows because from a basic perspective of seeing somebody that's obviously had a bad cut, send them to the doctor. Because I want to, we just want to get some baseline of heart rate and blood pressure, And then after that, we talked to them about what they did. What did you do to get here today? Some of the scary things, mate, doing it on their own. So kids cutting weight in baths on their own. Nobody watching them, no coach, no teammate, no parent, so there's a big danger. And then how many kids we've had have fallen over. So I can't count, but I can tell you now, we've had a number of athletes that just fell over, have got split heads, had to go to hospital, cut eyes because they fell over. So we kind of understand that. So the first thing we took is nobody should be cutting weight without their coach or the teammate. They need to be watched. And then it was like, how much did you cut? Mate, it was horrendous. Like the things we were listening to. I think I told you about the guy that was doing 0.2 liters per kilo for 10 days of a water load and cutting, and then doing a three-day drop, then to stop. He'd been eating 900 calories. He's a lightweight. It was like, mate, it was horrendous. Now, he ended up in hospital, mate. So, because he collapsed and he didn't make it to fight day, but And actually, if I think about that individual, I've not seen him fighting too much from that time after that. So I think I can't get away from that. Every time we kind of interview, there was a 1 and 2 who'd do it right. It was the clean water, not understanding about electrolytes, not understanding how to recover, and then there was those that were sick and had GI problems because, of course, they're that hungry, they just gorge themselves with all kinds of overeat. We've had people lost the next day because they were sick and had such severe GI issues. So, but it was everywhere, mate, if I'm honest. And the best thing we ever had was Chris Lamb being there, spending time with these athletes and actually saying, look, this is your position now from what you've done. We didn't have any, I guess, control to say, you can't fight, you shouldn't fight, that kind of stuff. You're the promoter, you want people to fight. But like what we were trying to do is send people away with some basic advice and actually a product, which basically glycogen and electrolytes. So actually say, get that in your water. I know that sounds very basic, but when they're coming with clean water, I banned that. I banned them all from clean water and actually give them product to use to walk away with, just to start the process. But then I wrote to the gyms and I'd phone the coach and I start talking to them about, what you're doing and trying to influence change. I had a great deal of success with that. And some of them guys who are amateurs now, I've still got on as pros, who make weight like kings, who walk on the scale doing really well because you got them at an early age. But it's 1s and 2s, Jordan. And I've said this yesterday. Of all the people I've got on, little nutrition apps they've got that I do calls with, it's just not enough because I'm trying my best to get through to the people, but it's not enough. And if we could kind of get all these people that are trying to give, and with the best intentions, as you say, publishing research, talking about it on Twitter, holding their webinars, doing talks, if we could get them together to just change their direction slightly and say, tell you what we're going to do, let's go out with them and let's go and talk to some athletes. Let's go and see what's going on. I feel that time would be better spent to making the change in culture because they would really realize what's going on at the sharp ends and what these athletes go through and how they can help them to educate.
Yeah, you're absolutely bang on, right? And I think it's a conversation. We keep saying it over and over again. It is multifaceted. We can appreciate that it's very multifaceted, right? But I'll sing it till the cows come home. And I think it's because I've seen it happen where we are in the world, in Australia and New Zealand. Culture change and influencing change at the grassroots level, right at the bottom in the gym, is how you make change. And I always say this, like, we've been with City Kickboxing for years now, and every athlete that has a questionable amount of weight to make, the head coach, Eugene Behrman, puts me on the phone with him. And it's almost to the point, I don't want to say this, and it's a credit to Eugene, where he's almost mocking them. And he's almost gets them on FaceTime. He goes, look at this guy. He thinks he's going to cut this man weight. You tell him he's getting on a plan, and then we're starting fight camp. Tell him how long he needs to go on a plan, then we'll start fight camp. And then he just goes, you're kidding. And then hangs up. And that's because the culture we've created is that it's not cool to cut weight. We've shown that the senior guys, they don't need to do it a lot. Yeah, sure. You can cut some weight, do it responsibly. Don't make that the main focus. You win world champion belts, you win big title fights by focusing on fighting, not by focusing on cutting weight. And making those changes at the gym level is so important. The challenge, like you say, Paul, how do we do that on the mass scale? How do we get that out? And how do we spread that out to all of these juniors around the world?
I think I'll go back to amateur boxing days, and bear in mind I'm 54, I'm going back some time, right? But I still had a coach that when we used to walk in the gym, he would weigh us day in, day out. And if we were over a certain level of weight, over our competitive level, our competition weight, you were sent out the gym. You don't come in unless you're within this weight. Yeah, so tolerance. And it always made an impact on me that when I think about it today, I didn't think about it then. I just thought he was a bastard, right? It was just like, oh, get off my case, But now when you think about it, he created an environment about you were on it all the time. And actually, you would never be matched for the fight. You would never go into competition. And actually, you're not going to come and be part of working with that team if you came in overweight. And I think sometimes if you look at gyms, when we talk about tolerances, and I know that's varied, but if we can kind of make people understand that out of competition, putting this, gaining weight, it needs to be within the tolerance. And actually, you're not going to be matched. We're not going to put you in a position that you've got 6 weeks to lose all this weight because you put all this weight on, because now you've got a match. We shouldn't put them under that pressure. It's like when you at that walk around weight, we can then consider matchmaking. because then, you know, you're in the gym, you're working, and we know it's sensible. That made an impression on me. And the more times I've been and seen what people do and take these short notice fights. Short notice fights are great, right? If you're walking around at the right weight, but they're absolutely horrendous if you're not, you know. And I've got a 18-year-old that come to me on the Emma squad that wanted to lose 10 kilos in 8 days. It's like crazy because he wants to take a short notice fight. And we you know, fortunately, he pulled out the fight, which is great. But I've seen people do that, Jordan. And then, so where does that start? That starts with coach, doesn't it? It starts with the coach to say, you're not taking the fight. Like, I'm not even going to consider matching you at all until you start coming into the gym within this, you know, at this weight. And I think that would help, because a lot of the guys we get into this dangerous place with sometimes is when they come to us because they took short notice fights, but they're not managing the weight all year round. And it puts you in a difficult position, relating to something else that you did on one of the podcasts, I think, where you talked about in one of your articles. It's like, what do you do at that stage? Because if you don't help them, they might do it anyway, but probably in a really bad way. Or do you help them and try and mitigate that risk? Because I've done that, you know, I've seen that before when I said I can't work with you, but they still did it. And I know it wasn't great for them. And it puts you in that difficult moral place, doesn't it? What do I do at this stage now? Do I say, no, I'm not getting involved with you? Or do I try and mitigate the risk? It's a tough one. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I definitely know it's a tough one, and you won't ever find that. I never found it when I was working with rugby players and soccer players. I was stuck in such an ethical dilemma as, oh, do I give Johnny some yogurt and granola before his training, or do I not? But you're right. It's a tough one, right? Because at the core of it, I really do believe better education is the principle, but it takes time. Like, even if you go in with gym, if you work with clients, it takes time to influence that change and change that mindset. Behavior change is a really difficult thing. At TFD, we have a PhD doctor and his team who help us design ways to elicit behavior change in our athletes. That's how difficult we find it is, that we had to bring in a PhD to teach us how to do that. And one thing I've learned from working with him and his team, it takes time, and you need to create so many different intrinsic and extrinsic cues and environments to make that happen. And in that time, they've still got to make weight. They've still got to compete. They've still got to do all these things. So while you're in that process, if you're the person making that change, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be in that ethical dilemma, and you're going to face that situation of, oh yeah, okay, so what do I do? We're not quite there yet where this person can make all these informed decisions and do it in a good way, but they've got to make weight and I'm here. It's a really tricky one. And I think I always come back to influence change with the influencers in the gym, right? Like with the coaches, with the seniors. And like you're saying, even with the younger guys, you don't have to be a senior member at a gym to have great influence. I've worked with people in gyms who were juniors, and then all of a sudden they haven't said it or spoken about anything, but they've seen the results. The older guys have seen the results that they get, and they can rock up to training twice a day and feel really good and peppy and full of energy and jumping around. They still make weight, and they go, what the heck's Johnny doing over there? And then all of a sudden you're influencing change that way. I really do think that. And I think it's a good point as well with the education, right? Because so often the coach is going to be the one. And I think it's a great idea, like your old boxing coach coming in with the scale. If that coach is educated enough where they can make those informed decisions and pass that informed consent onto the students, that's an entire gym that you're influencing that change in, right? And then that entire gym is going to be part of a bigger community where other gyms are going to be looking at that, and you can spread that education. I really do believe that, Paul. I think that education is at the ground root of that. Have we cracked how to deliver that education? I'm not quite sure yet.
No, we haven't, mate. And I think we've got to be all things to all different people, right? They've all got different challenges, you know, from the young athlete to the more experienced athlete to, I mean, I've even come to this in GPP phase of like out of camp. I've got kids that train all year round and they're brilliant. When they come in camp, they're brilliant. And they are starting to lead the way. But I would say also at the same time is that they're doing all the other things right all year round. They're not cutting a lot of weight, they're staying at the right weight. And I think that's a big influence. But how we influence people and coach it is multifaceted, because we've got to get basics out. But we are dealing from kids to senior athletes. We are dealing female to male. We're dealing with people that've got that are full-time athletes, the part-time athletes are trying to fit all this in, that maybe they're on the road all the time in their job. It's harder to control, what they do. But the basics are the basics, right? How we influence the basics is a big part for me. And if we could start with coaches take responsibility about, because weight cutting starts around competition. If you don't agree they can be in competition, unless they get to a weight, then it's going to mitigate that risk, right? It's a good start to be, I think. And that's more and more I won't work with athletes unless I can talk to the coaches, because it's important that we always kind of link in and talk. And that's certainly with the guys at Next Gen. That's what we're talking about right now, about being in tune. That big board that's on the wall, all the athletes are listed, and they jump on the scale and we know where they're in, and we can look at their tolerance and who's going to go the tick by it to say you're ready to match it and those you aren't. Because if nothing else, it creates some peer pressure. They're all they're all at the right weight and these aren't, and maybe even training with the fight squad. I don't know. It sounds a bit harsh, mate, but I mean it makes a difference.
Yeah, I think it does sound harsh, but the reality, it's a harsh sport, right? Like you don't get into this sport if you're not that type of person, or you don't want that. And sometimes the truth hurts, right? And that's just the fact of the matter, is that if this needs to be done to make an effective change, and it needs to be done, and I'd support that for sure.
Yeah, you're right there. It's a harsh sport, and I guess you're only doing this because you care about them. You're only putting these practices in place because you care about the athlete, right? So, maybe that's the way we need to talk. We're doing this for you. We're not doing it to be hard on you, or we're actually doing it because we care about you, the athlete,
Yeah, combo I find myself having with athletes nowadays. And again, like I'm very, very, very lucky with the athletes that I get to work with, and I've been fortunate enough to work with over the years. It has made me realize just how much I like winning. And I really do like it. Like I got into performance nutrition to help athletes win, and I like that feeling. And I get you can be a good sport and whatever, but I'll say I'm very, very, very obsessed with winning, and I like it when my athletes win. I like it when they do well. And the thing that becomes very, very apparent when you do this with a lot of athletes is that weight cutting, even if it isn't extreme, even if you're doing moderate weight cuts, they become a hindrance to winning, and that is a really big rock in my shoe that annoys me. And I always have this convo with athletes where I go, look, I want you to win because I like winning. I can't have you doing this. I can't have you doing this because it makes me look bad, but more importantly, it'll make you look bad and you won't be able to perform at your potential. If you like winning, this is probably not something you want to make a habit of doing. So let's fix it. It's a necessary thing right now. Let's work on it. Let's put a plan in place. Let's gradually bring this down so we can focus on the things that are going to make you win in the long term, because that's why you're doing this.
See, therein lies the psychology of the coach and the message, and that's something I'm really interested in. The way you coach the message is super important, isn't it? The reason why we do this is super important. Of course, it is about winning. There's no advantage in doing bad weight cutting, and that's a message that needs to be hammered home at every gym with every athlete. Stop doing it if you think it's an advantage. And that conversation I go back to with the weigh-ins the week before, when I said, I actually used them words, there's no advantage, and you're in no headshots. It's kind of junior competition, like it's a mix of like 1 minute and 2 minute rounds. I mean, Christ, where are you trying to get advantage? It was like, well, there is in wrestling, but no, there isn't. These kids are on the mat with bigger kids every day, but you're actually having them arguments. That's direct with parents. So, coaching that message back out to say there's no advantage is important. Actually coaching the message out to say it's a real disadvantage is actually important, isn't it? Actually, chances are you're not going to win because you have done this, and the chances are you will win if you don't do that. So that's an important message.
Yeah, it's a good one too, as well, I think, to bring up. And what we do at TFD, right, is like, we're fortunate that we have a lot of people who want to work with us. So that's part of our screening, right? Is we look at what these guys, how much they cut weight, because like I said, it's a hindrance to winning. And if we say to them, like, look, it looks better on us as a business, as us moving forward, if our guys do well, and like you cutting all this weight is probably not going to fit in with that. And like, we'll work with you, but we've got some work to do first before we let you slap the brand on and you start telling everyone that you're working with us. Like, we need to fix this. You need to get better at doing this, because again, we don't need a study to tell us that the trees are green. I know that if you start cutting a lot of weight, you're not going to do well. And I don't want that. I don't want that. I want you to be winning. And it's important. I think we just need to get that message out there that gone are the days where we think that if you cut all this weight, it's a big dick measuring contest when you go there and I cut this much weight. Not about that. That's not what people are tuning in to see. That's not what puts bums on seats. People aren't paying pay-per-views or buying your merch and your t-shirt because of how well you cut weight. They're tuning in to see you for how well you fight, how well you compete, how much of a personality you are. Cutting weight hinders every facet of that. So why do we bother doing it?
Yeah, and I guess another point is, and it's really big in the social media at the moment, is CTE. And the dehydration linked to CTE, or the acute weight cutting linked to CTE as well. Again, it's a lot of research and there's a lot of things published, and some of the things published, you'd think you can never have combat sports again, if I'm honest. You've got to put that in perspective as well. A blow to the head causes CTE. Well, how are you ever going to stop that in combat sport, right? So, but of course, there is the links to, to acute weight loss and CTE, and it's something we've got to consider. I mean, obviously, from an amateur perspective in juniors, there's no headshots, and that's super important. But even going back again, mate, I've got to keep linking to this conversation between them two parents and them two young athletes. One of the parents was complaining there was no headshots. Also, was trying to, actually causing a lot of drama about, I thought this was headshots. Nobody told me it wasn't headshots. Let's negotiate. Like, I'm sure they'll agree headshots. At 15, with his son who sat in the bath, it's like, look, and the bottom line is, mate, because of that behaviour, that kid's just lost his slot on the Emma squad. Now, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that, because the kid was embarrassed, because that kid has been at one of my seminars or talks to the youth squad. But what you do when you've got a, overpowering parent, the parent's behaviour doesn't fit. Mixed martial arts is a tough enough, passionate place anyway, without screaming and shouting between parents, and by the way, unfortunately, after the event there was problems again and they had to be removed from the venue. So pull all that together, it's like we've got to influence change in that, because clearly that kid's under pressure from a parent, to not only be doing headshots at 15 in a 7-ounce glove, which is a worry. It's also been doing a dehydration method to make weight and thinking it's all cool. Like, I know it's an isolated incident, but you and I know that's not isolated. That'll be going on in a lot of other places. That's just one show with 15 bouts, and it's happened on one fight. But how many more are going on around the country? How many other parents are doing the same thing? Hopefully not many, but the chances are there will be.
Oh man, absolutely. I think you go look at any sport, and combat sports aren't any different, right? Go down to any football field, any lacrosse field, any hockey field, and you see these passionate parents, right? And it's a shame to see. I've seen it in jiu-jitsu schools where I was competing and training 14 times a week, and you see these parents sitting on the sidelines yelling at these kids and then grilling them about their diet. And like we keep saying, this is a multifaceted issue, and I think what it boils down to is the right education from the right people delivered the right way. That's what's going to influence change.
I think, to a parent, even that parent, that behavior wasn't ideal, there's got to be a way we can still influence. He still loves and cares about his kid, right? It just doesn't get it. Yeah. And as much as he needs to change his behavior around that area, there's no doubt he loves his kid, because possibly he wouldn't be traveling to shows and taking them to places. And look, your kids, sometimes parents will get the kids trying to do what they couldn't maybe. And, but ultimately for me, every parent's going to care about the kid. Why do they travel all around the country, taking them everywhere, spending time with them? So we've got to try and utilize that, knowing that a parent cares about their child. And then the way we influence that parent with the right level of education is then super important, because if they care about the child, they're going to listen to some of this information and know the dangers that they're potentially creating. And I think that's super important as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, we are running out of time. I want to give a chance to talk about Vortex Combat Sports. I know we're talking a lot about Emma right now, but Vortex Combat Sports, we gave him a bit of a shout out, Dr. Carl Evans. He's if you listen to the podcast, you are no stranger to Carl. In the world of cutting weight, he is the Helio Gracie, I would say. He's the master black belt in that world. You guys are doing some pretty epic stuff over at Vortex Combat Sports. I feel like every single person in the UK who competes in combat sports at an elite level is under Vortex. Again, how are you guys fitting all of this in?
Well, they're not, clearly. But look, if I'm honest, mate, it's tough because we have a lot of athletes on. Carl is really super busy in professional boxing now as well. I work with a number of boxers, but it's funny, isn't it? Because we're not really good at marketing ourselves. We don't really go out there. With our Insta's poor, if I'm honest, at best. But what's happened is we've been making a difference in athletes making weight, and they're telling each other, and that's where the reputation goes. I think it's solid practice of people making weight with good results and winning fights, Jordan, and that's the most important thing. How do we fit it in? It's tough at the moment. We want to try and reach out to bring more of a team in, like you've developed, if I'm honest, mate. You know, you've got a good team, a great team of people around you. We need to develop that. Vortex needs to go up a level. We've acknowledged that. We need to do more through website education, probably attract more clients, but you've got to be careful, right? Because if you attract too many, then you're going to diminish how much time you spend with them and actually probably lessen the offering that you give. So for me at the moment, we are enjoying it. I think that's the important thing, but we do get a little bit of burnout at times, mate. And Carl's traveling a lot as well. I travel now and then, but I try and limit that, if I'm honest, because the minute you travel, then you're losing track potentially of other clients. So we cover many bases as well. We're not just doing nutrition from a weight cutting standpoint, performance nutrition as well, but we're doing strength and conditioning camps, and we're doing programming for people. We've got them online, and people have come to us every day. It's a 7-day-a-week job, if I'm honest, mate. But I think our alignments between Carl and I were perfect together. You're talking about one of the very best in sports science, which I'm not. But I'm a reliable, long-standing practitioner that understands all the basic principles and can deliver that. And to be fair, mate, I'm a student. I've never stopped learning, and I never will, because I enjoy it as well. But we've had some success, mate. But we look up to people like yourself, and there's others. There's not many I don't feel I look up to, if I'm honest, and really respect. Carl obviously is one of them. And we just want to keep going, but it's hard to turn a person down, especially when they're good athletes. But we're linked to 2 big gyms, boxing and mixed martial arts. But I don't know where we go next, mate, because I think we need to get some good people in. But then you've got to make sure that you kind of screen these people, that they are good people, and that they take them principles away, and that they coach it in a certain way, and they give their time. Because it's a labor of love for me, Jordan. That's the difference, I think. Whilst I'll always have this entrepreneurial thing, about Vortex and the commercial side of it, I have other good businesses, so I know that sounds different, but don't get me wrong, we charge. Yeah, it's, they're paying money for it, but it's a labor of love. But when I watch Carl in action, it motivates me as well and inspires me. But we talk every single day about athletes, mate. Live and breathe it. Travel the country yesterday to sit with the team and talk about all the things we want to do. And we've still got a long way to go. By September, we'll have our educational platform in place. So the plan's in place. I'll make sure that happens. And then we want to not just be seen to working with the professional athletes. We want to make a difference in the youth sport, all the things we've talked about as well. So it's good times for Vortex. We've got some great athletes, interesting athletes, athletes we enjoy being with, because that's a big part of it, right? You've got to work with this athlete and enjoy spending time with them. And I think we're blessed with that as well. We've got great athletes we work with.
Now, we've put this off the entire podcast, Paul, but we're going to talk about the last 5 minutes. We're only going to do 5 minutes on it. Is one of your Vortex athletes. Like I said, for the people listening, Carl is one of the persons that I've learned an immense amount from. Carl has shaped my career more so than I would say any other practitioner in the world. The way he has changed my thinking about practices and the science he has exposed me to. One of the best in the world. Paul, obviously you yourself, one of the best long-standing practitioners in this. Like you said, you've just been doing this for so long. I don't want to say one of your most famous athletes, but he's definitely up there, right? I'm talking about Mr. Paddy The Baddy. I have a very different view on this. I know a lot of people, and I want to preface this is because I work with a lot of high level athletes and we deal with the media all of the time, all of the time. And for people listening to this, I know this might be a shock horror. The media tends to over exaggerate things. They tend to throw things out a bit. And when it comes to nutrition, it's an interesting thing to talk about because everyone can relate. Not everyone can relate to punching people in the face and head kicking people and choking people out, but everyone can relate to nutrition and eating food. And I feel like that is why Paddy the Baddy has got so much media attention because he does love food. I think he loves food. But then again, he is such a talented guy. He's such a talented athlete. And I've spoken to Carl about him. Carl's worked with him for years, and he's been around you guys. I think there's a lot of misconception. I want to talk to you about, like, let's talk about, let's clear the air quickly. We don't want to give away any trade secrets, but what's happening with Paddy?
Look, I think first and foremost, Paddy's enjoyed this process of putting on weight. He doesn't care. I mean, and that's the thing, he doesn't care. But I will also say he loves his food too much. And if anybody asks me, do I agree? I don't, if I'm honest. But I ain't going to change Paddy, and there's not many people that will. But there's two sides to him. Discipline in camp, outstanding. Discipline out of camp, not great. But you've got to remember some things that he's probably not as bad as you think. When I see all this narrative that he's put 20 kilos on, it's like he hasn't put 20 kilos on. Absolutely hasn't put 20 kilos on. Anybody listening that doesn't understand what he weighs in at is not his walk around weight, so that's number one. I think he walks around lean. I mean, people I've seen recently when he's been with me have commented, wow, how's he lost all that weight? The best one in the world, he's only lost about 4 kilos, to be fair. So how's he lost all that weight? Jordan, I've had 20,000 messages of people asking me, can you help me lose weight on the back of Paddy Pimblett? It's ridiculous. But the bottom line I would say is his practice great outside the camp? No, but has he put all that weight on? No, he hasn't. Actually, Paddy, it looks worse because there's a lot of people made these memes with his big fat face. He does take the food into his face for some reason. It doesn't go around his belly, it goes into his face. But you've got to realize that it's not ideal, but at the same time, it's not as bad as people think. You look at him now, he's in good shape and he's walking around great to about 82 kilo. That man looks lean and healthy, And for those who don't understand, that's an acceptable place to be for the division he fights within. He's very astute and understanding the commercial aspect of what he offers and what his brand offers. He knows that he needs to make a living. It can be a short game. Paddy's a lot more clever than people think. And some of these things all around him eating and where he's eating is actually generating a lot of income for him. And kudos to the man for that, because, if I had to choose between eating at a really good place or getting punched in the face, I know which one I'm doing. It will be detrimental, I think, to longer term performance, but we've had that conversation. I don't mind saying that. Paddy and I have had that conversation. I would like him to walk around lighter, and I would like him not to eat and gorge on 10 to 11,000 calories a day sometimes, But that's the man it is, and I guess that makes him more interesting. That gets him into social media, and that's a big part of his income and his reputation. He's a good man. He will make weight, and he makes weight well. If you look at him, he's one of the best athletes we've got. This is a man that can carry all that weight, Jordan, and actually go out with the lads for the beer and go run a half marathon without thinking about it. The man's got an outstanding energy. You've got to watch him in the gym. The guy's an athlete. So all of these things might be detrimental longer term, but at the moment, guy performs. He's winning fights. He's changed his life. Probably people need to give him a break.
Yeah, and I want to make this point because it's important, and I want people to hear this. What Paul's saying is, I know we're putting out numbers, but 82 kilos for an athlete, I would say that's a very good weight for a lightweight in the UFC. I've seen lightweights in the UFC walk around out of camp, cough, Habib and Magomedov, walk out of camp up to 90 kilos, and they do brutal weight cuts, and they do weight cuts in a way that I would never, ever, ever let any athlete of mine do. You got to understand, Paddy has the likes of Carl Evans, like I said, one of the very, very, very best sports scientists in this. Paul, yourself, who's been around this sport and is involved in so many different layers, he's got one of the best teams around him. he's doing this in a smart way. I don't like it when people, take these photos and they take these Photoshop pictures and they make it out. I've had athletes literally get a photo done by a media person and they looked one way and they looked 10 kilos heavier than the next photo that was taken when they turned their face the other way. It's a media story. And I think people need to realize that. And nutrition is something everyone can relate to. So when you get someone like that, who's a big personality, and they go, oh yeah, it's something that's related. Like we said, he's making the most of it, right? I think people need to stop being so harsh on Paddy, because at the end of the day, from what I've heard from you guys, he's a superstar athlete. His work ethic is right there. And really 82 kilos for me, if I get a lightweight that comes in and they're telling me they're walking around about that, I go, that's really good. That makes my life a lot easier.
Yeah, look, and I think with all of his contracts out in America at the moment, it's not a great place to be when you're out of camp and you've got to look after yourself when you're getting taken around all the best restaurants in America, especially with his, he's with Barstool now and he has a lot of things to do over in America. So that's normally the time you'll see him eating, and putting on that bit of weight. But by the time he comes back, you've only got to see him now. He's in a good place. He'll make the weight. But no, it's not ideal, but he'll make the weight, and I don't want him eating the amounts he eats, but he'll make the weight. He'll make the weight, he'll perform. I've seen Paddy, and Carl has got the information. We don't mind talking about it, but from a study, we've seen Paddy do things that athletes shouldn't at featherweight, not lightweight. He did it before I reached out and said, you've got to come and work with me. Yeah. Because I can't watch you doing this anymore. He went 5 rounds in 2 world title fights. And I have no idea, Jordan, how he ever did that, because the numbers we got from the research that Carl did, which is before he started rehydrating, after weigh-ins, the guy was seriously ill. Like, he had some bad health issues. I don't know if you ever seen that footage of him throwing up in the cage, but like, that position he put himself in, the man still went 5 rounds. I have no idea how he did that. It was superhuman. But actually, if you look at him now, he's learned from that. The last time we did some numbers on him, he's in a phenomenal position from a health perspective. The last time we run him just before he entered cut week from his last fight in the UFC, his numbers were great. And that's the most important thing. So into the university, did some testing, fantastic numbers, in all areas. So longer term, who knows? But for now, he's doing good things and he's having a great life. And you know what? If he says when he comes out of combat sport, he'd rather be fat and happy than fat, that's the man's decision, right? Because the one thing we know is he's changed his life. And that's great to see for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great spot to leave this. So, Paul, we're at time, but mate, thank you so much for coming on, taking the time. I want people to be able to reach out to you. What's the best way for them to reach out to you personally? Best way for them to get in contact if they're in England for England Mixed Martial Arts Association, Vortex Combat Sports, Global Performance Nutrition Institute. Give us the plug for all of
them. Okay, so English Mixed Martial Arts, and it is at Emma. So Emma as in EMMAA. So anybody just get in touch via that. My own Instagram is at Rygor Paul, RYGOR Paul. Same as Facebook. GPNI at gpni.uk. At Vortex CSP is the Instagram. Okay.
There we go. And if you are in that side of the world, if you're in the UK, it is something I implore every single combat athlete to do. You don't have to necessarily go and work with them. Go follow those pages, have the conversation, go support them. And if you need the help, these two guys are the best of the best of the best when we're talking about making weight for combat sports, strength conditioning for combat sports, programming. Do yourself the favor and reach out to them. Paul, I'm going to leave that one there before I blab anymore. But all right, mate, thank you so much. And there it is, another episode of the TFD Performance Podcast. I hope that was an informative episode about the positive work that Paul and his team are doing for combat sports, and that it clears some of the air around Paddy the Baddy's weight fluctuations that seem to get so much media attention. This podcast will be available through the podcast app, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and if you follow along our socials at @the_fight dietitian, you can see all of the best bits from our podcast episodes. Thanks for listening in, and I'll see you guys for the next episode of the TFD Performance Podcast.